I'm George Guadiani. Turnedbygeorge.com is my website. The purpose of this video is to show you how I do my hot waxing, how and why I do my hot waxing to give the longest shelf life to what are valuable turning blanks. First of all, I use a big piece of cardboard and I use that to put under everything, so in case I splash some wax, it goes on the cardboard, which can be recycled, not on my floor, which would be very difficult to clean up. Let's get started. The griddle is on, and I'm heating it up now. The idea being, we're going to go ahead and let the wax melt a little bit while I explain some of what's going on. And we'll start with the wax. The wax is a collection of 3 different candles that I picked up at various garage sales. The total cost to these is about $1 for the 3 of them. I weighed them before I started. There's 3 pounds of wax here. If you were to buy this at a retail location, it's $6 to $8 a pound. So by taking a day and going to a garage sale and buying what is basically other people's junk, you can save yourself a lot of money, The griddle that it's sitting in is probably from the 1920s or 30s. It's old, but it has the largest surface I've been able to find, and the low profile edge keeps me from piling in too much wax. The other advantage to this particular thing, as opposed to a regular frying pan, which will work just fine, is that it has a fat trough, and what ends up going into the fat trough are the little extra pieces of wood that just kind of slough off as I'm doing the waxing. The advantage to having that is that I can keep a clean surface, and the waxed blanks are a little bit better in terms of handling. I've got 2 pieces here that have bark edges, and I'm going to talk more about those. I've got a round blank. I've got another square or vase form blank here. And the brush. The idea of the brush is to take off as much of the excess material as possible. Anything that gets into the wax becomes like a sandpaper texture. I've got a pair of gloves, and these are heavy-duty rubberized gloves. The idea with these is that I can handle the material. The heat isn't too much for my hands, so that I don't have to wait for it to dry and cool before I turn it to the next surface. The cover is an important thing to have because wax is combustible. If you get it too hot, it could ignite. If you think it's getting too hot, you're worried about combustion, cover it up. Okay, I'm going to take some of this out because it's starting to melt and it's going to get in its own way, like that. And I'll take this piece of aluminum foil out of here, which is just some kind of a warning. I'm going to go ahead and melt the rest, pretty much the rest of this candle in here, so that we have enough material to wax in. And the idea is not to put in too much wax, but to keep enough to come up over the edges. I'm sitting down because after you pick up a few pieces of wood, you can start to get tired, and we're working on the floor because there will be less splash. The idea is to create the least number of problems over the long term of doing this, because I'm just going to show you a few pieces, but sometimes I spend 3 or 4 hours waxing blanks that I've cut up. And if I were to try and stand or squat over this to do the work, it would get very, very difficult on my muscles, what few I have. So I also have on long pants and gloves. The long pants, the idea is to protect my skin from the splash that will inevitably happen. Eventually, no matter how careful we are, we're likely to splash, so let's avoid getting wax on bare legs because it will hurt. We need to keep the waxer hot enough to melt the wax and warm the wood. When we put the wood in, and I already did one side, but when we put the wood in, what we want to do is we want to see some bubbling around the edges. The bubbling tells us that there's evaporation from the wood, evaporation of water from the wood, and when we take the wood out, the wax will actually suck up into the grain, the end grain, giving us a better, longer lasting seal. And at some point, it's kind of like watching paint dry, because it does take a while for the wood to heat up. So over the course of this video, and in order to keep it as short and hopefully interesting as possible, we may shorten up some of this time. But you need to, as you're going along, wait to get the bubbles to make sure that you've got heat. Now also in the winter, you have a much larger problem with wood, especially if it's been outside until you're ready to try and wax it, because it might be frozen, and if it's frozen, it's going to take more heat. But you have to be careful, because wax is combustible. You can get spontaneous combustion if you get it too hot and smoky. You just have to be patient. Now, after we've gotten a surface done and it's bubbled adequately, I like to just get it down to a corner and let the wax drip back into the pan. It doesn't help us any to leave extra wood or extra wax on the corners. Now I'm going to go ahead and wax all four sides of this, because it has a bark edge on the top. And in order to prevent the bark from shrinking more than the rest of the wood, and either just leaving an uneven edge and oftentimes detaching from the wood altogether, the wax gives the edge the same protection as the rest of the wood and gives it a chance to dry as evenly as the rest of the wood. I have found that with the wax on there, the bark doesn't come off nearly as often. Now this has a bark inclusion in here that will mostly turn out, and it will be towards the bottom of the bowl, but up in this area here, there's also going to be figure that when you get the blank round, you'll be able to see some more interesting character in the wood. Now on this side, it's bubbling pretty well, so it's already been in there long enough. This piece is now ready to store. So I'm going to set it again on the cardboard off to the side where it won't be in the way.